Hello and welcome to Binge of the Week. I'm your host, Sonia, aka Binge of the Week. Today's episode, Missions Impossible but Accomplished. Anyone who knows me from the real world knows how much I love the joke of the Mission Accomplished banner on the aircraft carrier behind George Bush. It is one of my go-to jokes and references. So when I started breaking down this episode, it was pretty daunting because how do you talk about 8 movies that span, I think, about 17 and a half hours in a short podcast? You could focus on a lot of things. There's a lot happening. It is, in my view, easily the best action franchise of all time. I don't think it's that interesting of a take because I can't imagine having a different one. I remember when I said that for the first time a couple years ago, and I was met with some response of, what about James Bond? So I went and I watched, I think there's 26. I watched 26 James Bond movies, all in order, just because I felt I needed to have an opinion based on facts. And because I like that. And I was astounded by a lot of what I saw in a lot of James Bond movies that I hadn't noticed or seen before. And it's definitely a franchise that allows this franchise to exist in a lot of ways because so many of the stunts that happen in Mission Impossible come from the James Bond series. And it is, in a lot of ways, its predecessor, but it's just not there. And also, I think you have to take pound for pound what that means. What this franchise delivers in 8 movies without, I'm going to argue, without any true stinkers. I will argue that there are some James Bond movies that are downright almost unwatchable. I say almost because I did it. It is possible. It is mission possible, but it can be mission painful to watch all the James Bond movies. I wouldn't recommend some of them. Of course, more modern stuff, you have John Wick to contend with, which is great. I love me some John Wick. And some people like to toss out the idea that Fast and Furious is even a contender. I would beg to argue that it's not, just because of what it lacks in practical stunt work. Just drives me crazy. I stopped watching those a while ago. I used to like them in the beginning, though, especially when they were doing real cars on real roads. I'm of the mindset that I am watching an action movie because I want to see stunts performed. That's a lot of it for me. And we all come to movies for different reasons, liking different things, but it's really hard to top a franchise that spans 3 decades with 1 star doing the kind of stunt work they did, producing at the level they produced, and again, I would argue 8 solid movies. Not all gems, not all equal, but they all gave you something. And what's interesting about watching this franchise is how it does span 3 decades. So you can watch it evolve over time with Hollywood, with the style of filmmaking, with the different directors, with the characters and its objectives. And it shifts over time and becomes something else over each movie in a way. And everyone enjoys different things about it, I think. It's really fascinating to have done the live watch on Threads and get responses, and people's favorites are all over the map. And there's almost something for everyone who would like any of these kinds of sorts of movies to come in and enjoy at some point. But it's also interesting to think about the fact that people have come into this franchise at different times just because they've been going on for so long that some of us are old enough to have started with the first one, but some of us are so young and watching the franchise from the point of view of having come into it during the 4th one, which is my favorite. I do love Ghost Protocol the most. I think it's the most fun spy movie, and I think that's what I value. I'm here for a good time, the entertainment value of, yes, I want suspense and I want some sort of danger to be felt as a stake. But what I really enjoy is more of the comedic fun and action element that can be had during these movies. And I think the fourth one really delivers that better than the others and works tonally in that way throughout the whole movie. And it's really when the franchise kind of hits its stride. So I say that, and I know that I want to do objective rankings. I'm always here to talk about like the objective view of how we can look at this. And it's really, really hard to rank these objectively. There's a lot going on in all of them. Some of them are very different movies from each other. And what they were setting out to accomplish over the 30 years changed. And I have my subjective ranking, which is so much easier. I'm going to go from last to first. So bottom place for me, easy call, Mission Impossible 3. Then Final Reckoning, which is 8. Then Fallout, which is 6. Then Dead Reckoning, which is 7. I know that's shocking that it comes before Fallout. We'll get into that. Then 2. I know people will have feelings about that. Then 1. Then Rogue Nation, which is 5. And then Ghost Protocol, which is 4. So my favorite is Ghost Protocol for the reasons I said. 5 is my second favorite because I actually think, as we're about to get into the objective ranking, it's great. 1 to me is a spectacular classic movie. And even though it's not as big as the others, I think what it's doing really entertains me. And I still love it as much as I loved it back in the 90s. 2, we'll get into all of that. We'll get into why. And we'll get into why 3 falls to the bottom of the list for me. But when I try to get objective about it, they do shift. Like I try to remove what Sonia likes, which is Sonia likes 4. Sonia likes the laughs. And it's not to mean that I don't think I still, when I'm trying to do the objective ranking, that doesn't play into it. But I'm trying to think of like how well do they work at the movie they're trying to make? And that puts 8 at the bottom. Final Reckoning has the hardest time achieving what it's trying to achieve because what it's trying to achieve is too much. Then I would put 3 above that, and I know people think I'm nuts for putting 3 so low, but we will get into the flaws of the third movie, objective flaws, and objective good parts. Again, I want to say this while I'm ranking them. None of these are bad. I don't think any of them are actually bad. Some of them slightly less watchable, but I still think they're all solid movies. So I'm never saying like, oh, this is a bad one. I just think 3 is weaker than people think it is. I would put 7 above that, which is Dead Reckoning, and then MI2, which I know people think is dead last, but I will argue that it is not. Then Fallout, which I know people would put at number 1. I do think it sets out to achieve what it's trying to achieve, but so do the ones ranked above it. Because I would rank 1, the original, above it. So that's in third place. In second place, I would put Ghost Protocol. And in first place, I would put Rogue Nation. And this ranking that I'm doing is going to piss some people off. Some of you aren't going to like it. Stick with me, stay with me. Let's talk about why the ranking doesn't even matter of the overall movies. And that's where we're going to end up with this podcast, I think, is that like, what really is the merit of this franchise? And it's not ranking them. So while I say that it's not ranking them, I want to get into like really unpacking what there is to rank, because that's ranking these movies as movies against each other is so complicated because there's so much to what you're basing it on. These are 8 movies with 5 different directors. That's a lot of different changing of hands of control and style. And even McQuarrie, who takes up half of the franchise, he does 4 movies. His thing was, yeah, I still want to give the franchise the vibe that the director is changing every time. So I'm going to change my directing style every time. And he didn't do it really between 7 and 8 because it's a 1 and 2-parter. So it's one cohesive style, but that means that one director tried 3 different styles when he was directing inside of a franchise. So you still have 8 movies with 7 different directing styles happening, which is kind of crazy and why it's hard to kind of put them in an objective ranking list because they're not all trying to do the same thing every movie. Yeah, we've got the same protagonist. Yeah, it's a spy. But some of them are more spy movie and some of them are more action movie. Some of them are funny, some of them are not. So when you've got this changing of hand or changing of McQuarrie, I think that's what kind of bumps down Fallout for me when I do the objective ranking is that McQuarrie doing Rogue Nation to me is him doing his style. And it works so well. And then he did 6. He did Fallout. And I think he's doing someone else. Like he's just trying to not be him. And I would dare to say that it was very much an attempt at being Nolan-esque, which is just simply following the trajectory of what was happening in Hollywood at the time was to make that kind of movie because that seemed popular. So we've got this desaturized kind of self-serious version. We've got the introduction at 6 of starting to take itself so seriously that characters inside the movie are mocking the idea of the IMF. And there's just this tonal shift that happens at 6 that's a little different from what happened with the rest of the franchise when it changed hands, whether everyone understood what they were assigned to do or not. I would say that for me, being a big fan of what McQuarrie did, because I do love Rogue Nation, I think he directed very big movies after that inside this franchise, I would say that I've always been impressed, not just because I like Ghost Protocol so much, but I've always been impressed with Brad Bird, and I think he deserves a mention as one of the most impressive directors of this franchise, and I say that knowing that Brian De Palma directed the first one, and it was amazing, and John Woo is John Woo. So against those kinds of names, who even is Brad Bird? And the reason I'm so impressed with him is because this was his first live-action feature. That's crazy to me. I've actually never been able to fully digest that in a way that just makes me get over it. I'm always impressed by it. I'm always astounded, no matter how many years I've had to think about that. Just the fact that he went from doing animated films, which I think he did The Incredibles and Ratatouille, and then he's making Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol. That's insane to me. And he did such a good job. I just think it's so well done and works really just very well at what it's doing that I'm just impressed with him being able to knock it out of the park on a first go. Because I can't imagine that directing animation is the same as directing live action in any way, shape, or form. That being said, I know people love Fallout so much. It does cater to this very popular Nolan-esque aesthetic and thing that's happening in Hollywood. And I do wonder what people will look back at this era of Hollywood like. I wonder at what point it might start to look dated, that everyone was doing this like desaturated, cold, technical kind of display, which is how I see Nolan. And I know people are huge Nolan fans. I'm not trying to anger you. I'm happy you like it. It is not my world. I like Rogue Nation and I like Ghost Protocol and I like Dead Reckoning because I like to see some color and locations. Like, we're a spy movie. Show me some pretty stuff. Take me around the world. Show me some color. I do not want to be bummed out about like not seeing anything cool. I don't know. It is just not my jam. I just don't think that McQuarrie doing Nolan worked for me. But I'm happy if it worked for you because people do love Fallout so much. So that makes me get to the point of what really makes any of these great. Because I'd love to talk about the dynamic between Mission Impossible 2 and Mission Impossible 3. 2 movies that when talked about, I get really interested in the takes on them because to me, one of them is underappreciated and misunderstood, and the other one is what I would call a little overvalued. I think people tend to overestimate how good 3 is. And again, I think they're all good. They work. I watched them all repeatedly for decades. I have never stopped rewatching this franchise. I've seen all of them many, many times. So I'm not knocking any of them, but when it comes to 3, when I rank it low, people will always come back at me and say, it's the best villain. It's Philip Seymour Hoffman. Yeah, let me stop you right there. Love Philip Seymour Hoffman. He's amazing. That's one of the accusations I'd level at this movie. He's underutilized. He's not in it all that much. And that's true of every Mission Impossible movie, really. The villain never appears all that much in these movies. And while it's important to have a good villain because it amplifies the suspense and the threat level and believing that there's a stake, but he's not really around that much for me to be like, this is worth 2 hours of good filmmaking, is that like he's in a couple of scenes. He's great, but I think there's even moments where like the threat he's leveling, I think is kind of boring. Like, I'm gonna kill your wife. I don't know. Like, I'm not saying 2 does better than that. I would say that 2 is just flooded with casual misogyny and is a very damsel in distress kind of storyline. So it's not better than that, but because of the style of movie 2 is, it reads completely differently. 3 is trying to be a very serious spy movie. And to me, the worst thing about it is that I think it completely misinterprets Ethan as a character. I'm sorry. Ethan's not getting married and settling down in suburbia. They were trying to correct from what happened in Mission Impossible 2. I get it. Ethan became this like solo rogue agent superhero guy in MI2. It was a John Woo movie. And he's this like John Woo hero. And they wanted to correct from that. And they went and I think overcorrected. We've got the overcorrection of now Ethan's just going to settle down and train agents. Not for a second do I buy that for Ethan. And I buy that he might love Julia. We're on movie 3 with the third love interest. I always liked that the first one played it a lot more low key because she was supposed to be like recently widowed. But, you know, I could always use these movies pulling back a little bit on the whole romance storyline. I don't need it. But we've got Ethan falling for Thandie Newton in the second one. Then we've got Ethan getting married to Julia in the third one. And it's really just an overreach of like how much they wanted to pull back and make him like a regular dude. It was too regular. I don't believe it. And in fact, he can't really do it. He lasts about 5 minutes as far as I can tell. And 3 has the worst stunt of the franchise, in my opinion. That bridge stunt is an abomination, and I wish if I could reshoot anything out of these 8 movies, it would be that one scene. I think it is the physics of it don't work. It doesn't look good on screen, and it's like too much faking and that's another thing. By movie 3, we're still doing action that's not super great. I think the stunts in 2 are better. Because in 3, we've got J.J. Abrams doing a lot of shaky cam, quick cuts. I mean, I think also aesthetically the movie looks terrible. The color saturation and dark with bright lights just does not work at any level. I don't know what the color grading is on any of these scenes. It's like what I would call just an objective eyesore. I did have one person tell me they like it, but they recognize that it wasn't good. So even the person who likes it is telling me, like, I know it doesn't look good. I love my J.J. Abrams Star Trek look. I really enjoy those movies, actually. This movie, no thank you. No thank you to everything that he decided to do aesthetically in this movie. And what I would argue in favor of MI2 is that, yes, it is the black sheep of the family. It is a misfit. It is John Woo presents Mission Impossible. It is a John Woo movie first and a Mission Impossible movie second. When viewed as such, when taken in as like an avant-garde, stylistic, kind of just John Woo action flick with some doves, the stunts are really good. They're cartoonish, okay? Like the car thing on the cliffs is insane. Them spinning their cars together, hilarious. But it's really kind of cool. And the motorcycle duel at the end, love it. The fight between the henchman and Ethan and the way he like uses the mask to get him killed by his boss, genius. There's a lot of great stuff for a spy movie in this one. And I think if people could just surrender to its stylistic misfit nature in this franchise, it is a solid John Woo movie. Now, did he go too far? Is there too much slow-mo? Yes, of course there is. That dove, after that door explodes, is insane. But I would argue that if you judge it as a John Woo movie, it is fun. And a good time was had. So that's why I think these two kind of play this little trick where, in retrospect or in follow-up to the first one, 2 doesn't really make sense. But if you really just view it as its own thing, like, you can kind of remove it. You can kind of just like watch the franchise without it, and that's fine. And you can't say that about 3 because 3 introduces Julia. Julia ends up being like the linchpin of the entire franchise. It introduces Benji, which, if she's a linchpin because she's always kind of in the background of Ethan's mind, Benji is the heart and soul of the entire franchise, because Benji really is, to me, what ends up making the whole franchise work. Now, Ethan is great, but once you introduce Ethan and Benji, really it's not the romantic leads that give you a window into someone that's important to Ethan, or someone Ethan really wants to save, or someone Ethan respects. It is Benji. Benji is really the heart and soul of the franchise because everyone loves Benji. He's pure of heart and soul. He trusts Ethan at every turn. He's always the good guy. He's always funny. He's always genuine and earnest. And really, I think, gives an audience a window into just the most normal kind of person who could break into being a field agent. And of course, he's like a computer genius, so he's not normal, but he's not this like expert fighting machine. He's just so important to the franchise that I will always treasure the 3rd movie for giving us Benji. That is the single most important contribution this does to the entire franchise. And it is funny because it does kind of introduce these 2 characters that will go on to shape everything Ethan is about from here on in. Now, back to the idea of ranking them. What really makes these work? Because then there's the stunts, right? There's a big stunt in every one, and some of them more than one. And sometimes it's a stunt and a chase, like 2 separate entities. And then there's also the action element of having fights and stunt fighting. So I could even just rank them on the stunts, which I'm sure I would also get disagreement about, but this is why I would put 3 last on this list. The bridge, like I said, awful. On the China stunts, where he's like swinging from building to building, that's all green screen. None of that is real. Then I would put, second to last, I would put the first movie, just because it was a very small movie. I love the fish tank exploding stunt. It is one of my favorite scenes of all 17 and a half hours. The Kittredge, You've Never Seen Me Very Upset. The gum is a classic. I still love Hasta Lasagna, Don't Get Any on Ya. So I would just put it lower because it was still a very small movie. The train sequence is mostly obviously CGI and stage and green screen, although I think they used a wind machine to make him look like he was being blasted off of the helicopter. Then I would say MI2 is next because the motorcycle duel does a lot of work for me. It is a great scene. It is, again, completely cartoonish and silly, but like, I enjoy it so much. Like, just them throwing their bikes at each other and each other at each other. Then I would say 8, which has the plane stunt. And look, kudos to Tom Cruise at like, what, he was 60 years old at the time, like jumping around a plane. It looks insane. It's a huge stunt. I just don't think emotionally it does as much work as other stunts do, which might sound like a crazy thing to do, but I think like you want to care about the stunt. I would say 7 is next. I do love this stunt. It's when he jumps the motorcycle off the cliff. Amazing. I remember gasping in the theater, that silence when he actually jumps. And I had seen so much behind the scenes footage. I had seen so many clips of the stunt, and still when it happened in front of me on the big screen, it was just a huge impact. It's such a great stunt, and I still only have it in fourth place on the rankings because I do think Fallout goes above this movie because it does just have a lot. It has the skydive. It has the actual stunt fighting, which is amazing. That bathroom fight is epic. We all love that moment of Henry Cavill cocking his arms. Hilarious, but also just that is a brutal fight scene. And it has the helicopter stunt at the end, which is such a huge production stunt that you can't kind of deny it. It's amazing that Tom Cruise can do all that stuff. I think the mythos behind Tom Cruise doing all these stunts is such a huge part of the actual enjoyment of the franchise that you really can't deny this movie for how much it's stuffed in there. And I think by having Henry Cavill as this like other protagonist and then antagonist really does amplify the stunts because there's somebody else there doing this stuff. 5 would be my number 2 movie for stunts. I love seeing Ilsa fight, and it has the underwater scene, which again, the whole Tom Cruise holding his breath for however many minutes that was, and the 2 chase scenes. And of course, it opens with one of the biggest stunts of the franchise, which is Tom Cruise holding onto the side of a plane. I just think Rogue Nation goes so hard with the stunts. And I would, no surprise, put Ghost Protocol at number 1, not because it has more stunts than this, but I do want to fight for the fact that I think the Burj Khalifa is the most beautiful stunt of the entire franchise. Like, it's cinematically beautiful. It's not just that it's insane, which it completely is batshit crazy. The whole sequence on the Burj Khalifa is nuts. But I think for me it is that it is also this thing of beauty when he launches himself off the side to get back in. And it's just this pose. It's almost like a ballet move and you've got his leg kicked out and it just looks glorious. I think it also just was the first insane thing that happened in the franchise. It took 4 movies to get to the point where it was Tom Cruise doing a crazy thing and just kind of solidified what would happen with the rest of the franchise. Because to me, a lot of what happens in Ghost Protocol is like the decisions that will come to shape the rest of the movies that come after it. So from 4 on, the stunts are kind of at the heart of the franchise. And they do matter. They do affect how they rank because if you don't have the exciting stunt with Tom Cruise in a Mission Impossible movie from here on in, you kind of like don't have a Mission Impossible movie anymore. That could also just rank his runs. I do think here's where, and I'm not going to go through the whole list because I can't imagine what it's like to listen to a disembodied voice reading a ranking, but I do think the best run of the franchise is Mission Impossible 3. Shock surprise, this one gets first place. The China running scene is so epic. They filmed it in a way where you really, really got the sense of how fast Tom is running and how far. I think because the space is both open and closed in, because it's crowded and has a lot of markers that he has to move past, which is both people and buildings and bridges, but also it's shot in this wide angle. It really gives you a sense of space that is above the others. I think also Fallout does a great job because when he's running on the rooftops, and you can't deny Fallout because the man literally breaks his ankle on camera and then continues to finish the stunt while limping. It's actually crazy that they were able to use the take in which he breaks his ankle in the movie. It does kind of affect how you watch it, I think, when you know that. But yeah, I think the London rooftops is an easy second for that. And I think I would also rank, it's a short run. It's not even that impressive, but the run from the fish tank explosion to me, like really it was the first stunt Tom Cruise did. And I think it's what really opened, just the first hint of opening the lid that would be the can of worms that is Tom Cruise and stunt work. I think he got a taste for it that day, and we got a classic Tom Cruise run away from that restaurant, and the rest was kind of like written in the stars after that moment. And of course, like I think 7 has the Venice, and that's really good. And 4, I think the Sandstorm both looks really great and is a great visual at the start, but then kind of clouds the rest of the run very literally, like just a sandstorm takes over the run. 5's best run is the running to the plane. Anyway, there's so many things to rank. I can even rank his hair. Okay. Again, I'm not going to read the whole list, but I would die on the hill that the best Ethan hair is Mission Impossible 2. It is glorious. You might not like the long hair. It might not be your thing. Like, I would rank the shorter hair movies lesser than the longer hair movies. I do think 2 and 5 have the best Ethan hair. I also like 4, but I think it gets a little too styled in that movie for my taste. At this point, you would feel zero surprise to think that the worst hair was 3 and 8. I would say 3 is better than 8. I didn't really love what was going on in 8, and that's fine. 8 has a lot of issues. It ranks low a lot of the time, because again, I'll remind you, I'm ranking the 8th movie last. Dead last. Out of all of them. People say it's 2. I really do think that 3 and 8 are worse at what they're trying to achieve. Because 3 kind of just misses on the action front. A lot of the scenes. But what's really excellent about the franchise, and my real point, is that they all give us something. And I think that's why people kept coming back. It's the excitement of the stunts. They wanted to see what Tom would do next, but they also just always added something to the franchise. I think one is this undeniable classic spy espionage 90s film. You've got Brian De Palma at the helm of this ridiculous venture to take a kitschy 60s mid-tier TV show and make a blockbuster movie out of it. And it was still very contained. It wasn't this like big stunt work. It was still very like much we're doing spy stuff. And of course, it has a classic stunt. I mean, the hanging down into the black vault stunt, I think, really set off the imagination for what could be done with these movies, but it was still very quiet. That whole scene is very, like, the stunt is not in itself loud, if that makes sense. It is not big and explosive. The whole thing is like, oh, we have to be sneaky. And like, here I am hanging here. And it did just give this like imagination to the suspense, and this gamble paid off. They were like, oh, this is popular. We can do this. And they took this silly, like mask-wearing tech spy show and delivered a serious, good movie that was also pretty funny. And then you got MI2. You got this John Woo special, avant-garde, with bigger stunts. Again, too much casual misogyny, but a great leading lady, great hair, explosive vibes all over the place. This explodes, that explodes. A baddie that I think is undervalued. You know, people want to talk Philip Seymour Hoffman because he's amazing, but I feel like there's a real threat in the second film. I feel like this person is deranged and really, really crazy. And I think that works as far as like feeling like Ethan is under threat and that she is under threat. In the third one, we got the intro to Julia. Again, the intro to Benji, which I will reiterate is at the heart of everything that makes this franchise work. Every scene that is a Benji and Ethan scene works. Their dynamic of being this reluctant hero. As soon as Benji's introduced, Ethan gets to really shift into a reluctant hero role where he doesn't want to do the stunt. He doesn't want to do the thing. And it's Benji driving the action. It is Benji having this unwavering belief that Ethan can do anything. And then he accuses Ethan of going too far. But then he's always like, you can do that. That's not a big deal. I love that dynamic so much. Like, hey, just jump off this cliff. What's the problem? You can do it. So it is always Benji believing in Ethan, and then Ethan rescuing Benji, or Benji getting to rescue people every once in a while. I think at the end of Ghost Protocol, he gets to rescue someone, and of course, they play the Benji's gonna die card at the end of most of these after a while. Like, he's the damsel in distress of Fallout. He's dying at the end of Final Reckoning. He's the one that everyone cares about. They know this. So we thank Mission Impossible 3 for Philip Seymour Hoffman being an amazing baddie. He is really terrifying, and I just wish we'd had more of him. And actually, I really treasure him playing Ethan, playing Davian. That is actually some of the more fun stuff because he was one of the people that I think did the best at portraying himself as playing Ethan, playing him, knowing that he's wearing a mask and he's not Davian, he's Ethan as Davian. I think he did it the most subtly because like he's probably the most amazingly blessed actor out of the entire cast of all 8 of these movies. Then you got Ghost Protocol, which obviously I can't say enough good things about. It was just the franchise coming into itself. It was so funny. It really knew what it wanted to do. I just think the team wasn't there enough yet. Like you got the intro to Jeremy Renner's character. Benji's here at least, like driving all of the scenes from the beginning to the end. And you get the birth of like the huge, huge stunts. And then Rogue Nation comes in, and I think Rogue Nation really settles like who the real team of the IMF of this franchise is. And it's funny because you don't really get it for more than 2 movies, but I think once you get Ethan and Benji and Ilsa and Luther and even Jeremy Renner's character, I can't remember, but once you get a mix of them working together, I think you really start to understand like this is the core team. These are the ones that are going to last throughout the franchise. And of course, it gave us Ilsa. I mean, Ilsa, I think, is actually the best spy of the entire franchise. I think she's a better spy than Ethan. I could be wrong, but I think she's better than him. She just meets an unfortunate fate because Rebecca couldn't do this anymore. And I actually have to respect how hard it was for Rebecca Ferguson to not just step away from this franchise, but to have to like look producer Tom Cruise in the eye and be like, I'm done. So much respect. I wish they hadn't done what they did. We'll get into that in a second. MI6 Fallout. Even though to me the tonal shift is not great and I don't love the way that it becomes really self-serious, I know people do love it, and I do think it gave us this really solid mix of fight choreo that was really stepped up, a lot of great stunts, and really tight filmmaking. I think sometimes a little too technical, a little too tight for my taste, but also just introduce the escalation of what would be 6, 7, and 8, which is like the world is ending. What's at stake is like the end of the world, billions of people dying. So we were just escalating as this franchise goes on because they felt the need to do the thing that franchises do, which is like, we have to go bigger. I would always argue against that. Like, you do not have to go bigger. You just have to be interesting. I would almost love to watch MI1 again, sometimes more than a 7 or 8 because it's contained and it doesn't need to be about the end of the world to be interesting. But then you do get 7 and it does become, this Dead Reckoning becomes this impossibly big, navigating like the sins of being a part 1 movie quite well, to be honest. I think it works surprisingly well for being a part 1 because that kind of stuff never works for me. But the real crime it does is kill Ilsa. I'm not sure that because Rebecca left the franchise, we needed to fridge Ilsa. I have mentioned twice already on this podcast that I think the second one is super misogynistic. I think I was disappointed with this one when it kind of took a step backwards in how it was treating its female characters. Like, not only did you fridge Ilsa, but then Grace, to me, is written like a plot device, and a plot device that I'm supposed to care about in place of Ilsa, who I love, was a little hard. I think the writing of Grace can be very grating because she is just a plot device, but I do want to talk about the merits here. So the merits are that it really did navigate being a part 1 movie with a surprising amount of aplomb because it is so difficult to make a part 1 that is cohesive enough to be its own movie and watchable its own way. It did set up like, oh, there's something that's not resolved yet. There's sort of a cliffhanger, but at least we were fighting for the object of the key to the point where like at least the movie ended with the getting of the thing we were after the whole movie. And it did bring back color and locations and like the grandeur of having these big action movies wanting to look big and sweeping. And that's a nice thing to have back after I think Fallout kind of just like looked drab. And then there's MI8, which probably has the least redeeming qualities, but it did have the task of having to wrap up 30 years of a franchise. I don't envy that. I think they went way too big. They wanted to include way too much stuff. I'm a nostalgia freak, and I was like, you have to stop. Like, I was happy to have Kittredge back. I was happy about a lot of it, but it was just like doing too many things. That said, what it did give me is the return of Bill Dunlow and the introduction of Bill Dunlow's wife. They, to me, become, as much as Benji, the emotional crux of this movie. And by the end, the only things I cared about were, is Benji okay? And are Bill and his wife okay? It is epic to bring back that minor of a character from the first one and make him that interesting and sweet that we were immediately emotionally attached to this guy that like literally was just in a few scenes 30 years ago. I have to give so much credit for that beat alone. It makes up for a lot of the stuff that happened in this movie. Like, I never really understood what was going on between Grace and Ethan. Their whole vibe is awkward. I don't get it. The decompression scene, weird. Don't know what's happening. I just choose to focus on Bill. Because, yeah, they all gave us something. Some of them have demerits that are hard to get over sometimes. And that's okay. Like, you don't have to like 2 the way I like 2. And you can love 3 the way I don't love 3. But I do think what's magical about the franchise is when you take all 8 movies on, they all have something that's enjoyable. And I think even if you can't enjoy all 8, there's more of them that you enjoy that you probably don't. I would argue that people who like this franchise probably like most of the movies. I know some people are like, if I watch the franchise, I skip 2. That's cool. I think 2 is fun. That's fine. If I were going to skip any, I might skip 8. Maybe if only because it's like 3 hours long. And I love a long movie, but I don't know that I needed like a 15-minute silent scene of the submarine. I think that might have been like a little bit of an edit on my end. I might skip 8, especially because I don't mind watching 3, but I'm almost aggravated that the 8th movie tried to retcon the fact that we never knew what the rabbit's foot was in the 3rd movie. Like that the entire movie was based off getting this object that we never get to find out what it is, but then it literally is the entire end all be all in the last movie. And the last movie just like continues to harp on like, Ethan, this is your life. Ethan, this is your life. Ethan, this is your life. Look what you've done. I was like, okay, this is so heavy-handed. But I would say that that's the beauty of the franchise, is that the people who enjoy any of it enjoy a lot of it. I think there's more of it to enjoy than there isn't. And that whether you skip 1 or 2 of the movies, because watching all 8 is a crazy task. It's a lot of hours of filmmaking. Maybe you just want to watch one of them. I have watched Ghost Protocol a lot of times as a one-off. And I think it's really crazy to think about what it achieved from where it began. Because the first movie, I think us having lived through the franchise for 30 years, we take for granted that the first movie was a sure bet. It was not. I do think it was a gamble for Hollywood to be like, we can adapt this show that no one really cares about into an action spy movie that people will watch. I don't know that it was that much of a guarantee. And I don't think they thought it would become the biggest action franchise in the world. I don't think that they thought, oh, this is going to be this gigantic thing that gets so big and so elevated and becomes like one of the biggest stunt movies ever made. No, I think they made this little spy movie and they were like, this is a cool thing, right? People liked Mission Impossible, the show. And I think it's incredible that it became what it became and gave us all of this fun stuff to watch. It gave me Benji, which I will always be grateful for, and every stunt. I do love a stunt. I'm obsessed with stunts, and it is a lot of why I'm here, to watch Tom jump off things, onto things, between things. He's just jumping a lot. So I hope that these movies have brought you so much joy in life as they have me, because I have enjoyed them for way too long. I will continue to watch them, some more than others, in the years to come, and be grateful that we got such a huge action franchise starring one man doing the craziest, most out-of-pocket stunts that he could fathom, risking his life for our entertainment. All that said, I think I might be heading into rewatching season 1 of Reacher. I have never done just one season of a multi-season show on this podcast, but I put up a poll about what I should watch, and the options were Reacher season 1, Masters of the Universe, and Ride or Die. Right now, Reacher is well in the lead, and I do love that season. I watched it many times as comfort TV. I think the follow-up seasons are good. I just don't feel the same way about them as I do season 1, so I'd be happy to just talk about why season 1 is so awesome and leave it at that. So that's where we're headed. I'm not sure yet, but I think that's where this podcast is headed, is that Reacher season 1, starring Alan Ritchson, is the next watch. So if you've made it this far, thanks for listening and stay cool.